All right, good morning. Thank you for that. Thank you, worship team. I know I say it just about every week, but it is always so good to see you. So thank you for being here. You know, the weather, huh? What? Like we knew we were talking about this earlier, that we knew the cold weather was going to come after kind of a warm day yesterday. And I love a good rainstorm. Our dog doesn't, kind of freaks her out. I like it when it's kind of washing snow and all the dirt of spring away, but it was a little harsh waking up this morning. It's not even that cold out, but already I got used to 50, right? So anyway, thank you for being here. Today is our last week in our It's Not You, It's Me series, which is just kind of a relationship emphasis. So our assumption is that after today, there'll be no more relationship conflicts in the church. So we can just move on to the next thing. So you're welcome. There you go. There can be some right now. We've got about 30 minutes to cover the remaining possible issues, and then we'll move on. But we had planned on this being kind of a February service, but then Esther is preaching next week. Give it up for Esther. So make sure you come and invite everyone for that. She always does a great job, and I'm proud of her for just taking that. It's scary to come up here, so proud of her for taking that challenge on. And then the week after, we're starting a series in Philippians. So we kind of felt like this is sort of hanging out there. So this is kind of an appendix, an add-on to the 4-week relationship emphasis. And today we're going to talk about stewardship. So it's kind of I guess, like I said, an appendix to that series. So let me just retrace kind of where we've been so far to set the stage for this morning's message. When Michelle began, we kind of talked about two things that Jesus said. Jesus said the two greatest commandments are to love God and to love our neighbor. Right? Those is like if you want to know what to do or not to do. We're trying to figure out, boil it down to what are some guiding principles? What should I focus on? What's the most important thing? He says there's two most important things, loving God and loving our neighbor. He then put himself in place of and above the law. So the law, the Old Testament, the teaching was to give us some ideas on how to do this. He says, that was the start, now follow me. Follow my example. So when we follow Jesus, we have an opportunity to learn how to love God and how to love each other the way he loves God and the way he loves us. So that's what we've been talking about. How do I love God and how do I love my neighbor like Jesus did? Easy peasy, right? We just do that and it's done. No, it's hard. There's lots of reasons why this is difficult. And so we've been talking about some of those things. To begin with, Michelle talked about how we're image bearers. We're all made in God's image. So sometimes it's helpful to say, this person that's driving me nuts, I need to remember that they're an image bearer just like me. So I want to act like an image bearer, and I'm going to treat this person like an image bearer because we're both very... Saying image bearer twice that close together is really hard, so try it. So I want to remember that in my interactions with people, that we are all very, very special to God. We're made like God, that in some ways we resemble God, but we're also fallen. That was one of the other early principles she talked about. We're also fallen. So we're broken versions of what we were meant to be. So none of us is playing with a full deck. We're all a little empty-handed. And we're empty-handed in different ways, and that can create all kinds of problems. One of those things is barriers in communication. No matter how close you feel to someone, no matter how similar you are, there's going to be conflicts because we just communicate differently. Sometimes because of age or because of where we lived, and you guys haven't realized that email is the only necessary means of communication, like my people recognize, right? So we've talked about there's different ways we want to communicate. There's different things. Even if you're from the U.S., there's a huge range. I talked about how I used to have a job where I was on the phone with a lot of people, and if I was talking to someone from Canada, it was really chill, and everything wanted to be very polite. If I knew they were from New York, I had to brace myself because I'm going to feel like I'm getting yelled at, and they're just saying hi, and they're excited, but I'm feeling like, why are you so mad? They're not mad. That's just how they talk. We communicate differently. Some of those barriers are problems we can fix, right? We need to do better. Sometimes they just are, and so we learn to appreciate each other's image bearerness and fallenness and what that means for how we communicate. Maybe I need to adjust. And that's kind of the theme, right? It's not you, it's me. What can I do differently about how I communicate so you understand me better and I understand you better? We've had some hot tips that we've shared. Talked about being vulnerable and being humble. And remember that you're fallen too. Kind of said that. Speak how you'd like to be spoken to. Speak the truth in love. We have hard things to say. Let's say that in a way that is loving. Remember the first two things, loving God and loving our neighbor, like Jesus did. And most of the time, he was very soft-spoken, very gentle in his communication, trying to help us understand. He understood that whoever he talked to, he was speaking cross-culturally. His normal culture is very different from ours. The kingdom of God is very different from ours. So he was translating what God says is the most important thing to us. He did that gently. He did that kindly. So we speak the truth in love. I talked about how humility and forgiveness go without saying in the kingdom of God. They're cultural norms. So those of us who are trying to follow Jesus, we need to remember that humility and forgiveness are normative. Those are things that are expected of us. Those are things that make our lives better and make our relationships better, more whole, more abundant. And then last week we talked about boundaries. And I hope that was helpful. Boundaries can be a difficult thing to talk about. We didn't get very specific or practical, like this is how, because there's a million different scenarios or possibilities. We mostly wanted to leave you with the understanding that boundaries in our relationships, that comes from God. Those are necessary and good things. But boundaries aren't about shutting people out or about avoiding life. They aren't about just saying, I can't even. Sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need vacations or time away or whatever. But most of the time, we need to set clear boundaries so that I know where I end and you begin, and we can both be the best we can be. So boundaries help us protect what is most important to us. So those are some of the things we've talked about so far. Let me pray, and we're going to get into today's message. Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you for all that you've given, all that you've shown us in the series. Please bless our relationships. Help us to follow you into each interaction, to learn from you, to learn to be more like you, and to learn to love God and to love each other like you did. Lord, we need your help with this, and so we submit ourselves to you. And I pray that you would also speak through me today, that you would help all of us to hear what you have to say today. In your holy name, amen. Well, as I said, we're going to change gears a little bit. We're going to talk about stewardship today. And I'm going to go back to where Michelle began this series and then kind of go on. I'm going to talk about Genesis. And if you've been, if you're like me, and I know I am, isn't that terrible? That's a guy in Minnesota used to say that every time he spoke. If you're like me, and I know I am. Thought I'd slip that in there. I love Genesis. I love the creation story, and I often reflect back to it. To me, that's where the story begins. And it makes so much sense of so much after that in the story. Michelle began, and we're going to be starting in chapter 1, verse 26. This is where Michelle began the story, or began the series. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with the seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. So we're made in God's image. We're made like God. We have characteristics of God built into us. That's who we are. And so God makes everything. He makes the light, and he separates the light and the darkness. He separates the sea from the sky and from the water, and he fills it all with life. He puts light in the sky at night, the moon, and light in the sky, the moon and the stars, and the day the sun. He fills the water with fish, and the land with animals and plant life. Right? He fills it with his energy, with life, and it's good. And then he makes us like him. And he says, go and enjoy this, right? Go and multiply, subdue this, multiply this. We are given work to do. God, we get that from God. That we desire to work, that we like to make things and recreate things, make things better. That's God-given. From the very beginning, we were given, like God, that he worked, he created everything. He gives that nature to us. Go and do this and enjoy it. He gives it all to us to enjoy. Now, I will admit, I have, I think sometimes believers, people who love God and Christians have gotten this wrong a little bit. They read this, subdue it, which means I can do whatever I want to the planet. It's mine to destroy. I don't think that's true. I think God's saying, steward this. Take care of this. Enjoy this. Develop it. Here's the beginnings. Make new kinds of plant life, right? Grow different kinds of apples. Enjoy it. Plant gardens, plant farms, develop things. Enjoy it for a while and then pass it on to someone else. So our tendency to want to just destroy things, that's what children do when they're given a gift. They wreck it. As we get older and more mature, we recognize, I want to cherish this. I might break it, but I want to use it the way it's designed to be used. And so I take care of it. So I think creation care is something we're supposed to do. We're supposed to look after what we're given, not just waste it. God gives us the earth and everything in it to enjoy. And then he says what? Very good. Like, this is it. Everything up to that point is good. Now it's very good. He gives us the earth to steward. And so stewardship is part of our relationship with God and our relationship with each other in this life and this planet from the very, very beginning. Larry Burkett said, the one principle that surrounds everything else is that of stewardship, that we are the managers of everything that God has given us. I think managers is a good word there. It's not ours. It's ours to enjoy, but it's God's. Let's take care of it. We're giving it to stewards. So from the very beginning, our relationship is one of stewardship. God gives us something to steward. Then we jump ahead to Matthew, kind of the classic stewardship passage. Matthew 25, starting in verse 14. It goes like this. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. So in this story, God is the property owner, and he's given all of us something. We're gifted in speaking, leading, serving, singing, hospitality, problem solving, encouragement, listening, cheering people on, making money, managing money, connecting people, teaching, crisis intervention, you name it. We're all gifted with something. God, that's the story. God gifts us with something, and then he leaves us to tend to that, to enjoy that. That's the story Jesus is telling. So moving on in verse 16, he who had the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. And he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. And his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping when you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid. And I went and I hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. So we all have talents, and they're meant to be used. That's one of the points of this story. We're all given talents. We're all given abilities. We're all given resources, things that we're good at, things that we're interested in, things that we do well, that feel natural to us, that when we're doing them, we feel right, it feels good. We're all given those things. And we're given those things to use them. And when we use those things that were given, the way they were intended to be used, they multiply, they grow. When we don't, they don't. So for instance, if you have the gift of hospitality, some people just do. Michelle has that gift. Michelle just can make you feel comfortable. She sets the stage. It's not about decorating. It's not about cooking. She does all that stuff well, but she creates an environment where people feel comfortable, right? I mean, I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. She's really good at that. If you have the gift of hospitality and you use that gift well, you make people feel seen and valued. Put that in this context of this church. Say you're involved with our hospitality team and you're greeting someone. And you make them feel seen and valued and they feel safe here. Like, this is a group of people that notices me. I feel comfortable being here. They might then say, I have some skills or some abilities, some talents. I'd like to share them with the church. So for instance, Jack played guitar today. He's much better than I am. I'm fine with that. He does this thing called, practice. So that's one difference. But okay, I never will say I'm a guitarist. I own a guitar. That's different. Owning a guitar and being a guitarist are different. But I do this occasionally, and I like doing it. But let's say you are on a hospitality team, and we're looking for more musicians. We're always, if you have musical talents, we're always looking to add to all of our teams. But say you're part of the hospitality team, and someone comes in, and you're really good at making them feel comfortable. This isn't manipulative. You just love people, and you want them to enjoy what you're enjoying here. A community of people that loves each other and is trying to love God and do the best they can to share that with La Crosse. Right? That's kind of what we're about, right? But you're good at helping people feel comfortable so they can experience that. Maybe that person comes in and after a while, sees me plays and says, I think I can do it better than that guy. I'd like to, can I be a part of the worship team? Your gift of hospitality, when used well, creates an environment where other gifts can be used. Does that make sense? They multiply, not just for your team, but for other teams, other abilities, other things that this church needs to grow and to serve one another. Our gifts, when used well, help people feel seen and valued, and in turn, they multiply and they grow. We use them the way they're intended to be used, and things are better. Moving on in our story. But his master answered him, "You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Now this parable kind of takes a dark turn, right? Like, you're going along, you're kind of grooving with it, and they're like, that got serious. The point is this: Jesus gifts us with things, abilities, things that we can do, through which we can glorify him, share his love, represent him in our image bearerness. That skill, that ability, that gift, when done well, honors God because it reflects God. It reflects that part of his nature that you have that I don't have, because we're fallen in different ways, right? When we do that, we grow, right? We get better. I lost my train of thought for a second there. So this story, it gets dark, but focus on the previous part. Jesus is saying this: I'm going to gift you all to do what you do. But if you're not going to, that's your choice. I'm going to transplant then. So he isn't this anti-Robin Hood where he's robbing from the poor and giving to the rich. What he's saying is, I've given you all gifts. And yes, we can say there are some people that just seem to have a lot of talents. And that may be true. Some have 10, some have 5, some have 2. We had a guy from our church back in the Twin Cities, our parent church. He calls himself a 5-talent person. And I'm like, well, dude, if you're a 5-talent person, I've got a good half on a good day, right? Like, he's just going to do so many things. If we don't work and live in our giftings, we begin to diminish and we begin to fade. But Jesus is going to continue to move his church forward. And so that gifting that you're given, if you don't want to use it and you're going to lean away from that, Jesus is going to take that and give it to someone else because the church needs it. Paul refers to the church as a body, right? And so there's all different kinds of parts, eyes and ears and feet and hands. If you don't want to be a foot, well, we need 2 feet, so I'm going to give it to someone else. That's what's going to happen. And you can make that choice, but your life is going to be decreasing and fading and less of what it was intended to be. You're going to have less of me in your life. That is the consequence. Not because Jesus is vindictive, but that is your choice, and he's honoring that choice. You begin to fade, but the church is going to continue, and someone else who is willing to take the step into their giftings, I'm going to give that to them so the church can continue, because the church needs eyes and ears and hands and feet. Does that make sense? That's what happens when we lean away. Now, there can be lots of reasons why we don't work in our gifting. Sometimes we're scared. Like I don't know if I can do that. I'm scared maybe I'm not very good, or maybe they're not going to like it, or I'm scared of doing something in front of people or whatever. That's okay. I get that. So let's talk about that. Let's find ways to kind of ease into it, to find ways that you can gradually experience that gifting, get some successes, learn about it, and then move into it more fully. That's different than just saying no, or I don't care. It's like, I'm scared to do this. Okay. If you don't know what your gifting is, which a lot of us can say, I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know what my special ability or talent is, then we can also help with that. Sometimes it's hard to figure out, like, I know what I'm good at, but I don't know how that could be useful to the kingdom of God, or how it could be useful to the church. A story I've told probably to many of you. I love this story. Is a friend of mine back home. He's a nurse now. He's really good with his hands, and he graduated college. It went into some kind of electrical field. I think he was going to be an electrician. He was just really good at that stuff. But while he was in college, after high school, he was interning or kind of helping his youth pastor, and really loved the work he was doing with his youth pastor. He thought, I think I'm called into ministry. So he leaves Milwaukee area and comes up to North Central in Minneapolis to go to Bible college to learn how to be a youth pastor. And then while he's there, he's involved in different churches and student leadership, and begins to feel like, I don't think that's it. I think I liked working with my youth pastor, but that's not for me. So then he starts working with the facilities team at North Central, and he's really good at fixing stuff, and he's got a student team, and he's developing those guys, and he's really good at it. And then begins to think, maybe I wanted to go into nursing. I don't know how he got to there. I don't know all those steps, but he starts thinking about nursing. So he starts going to nursing school, and he loves it. He loves everything about it. It's like, I don't know. Once he said to me, Jake, I don't know why I love this so much. I said, well, you like knowing how things work, right? So his skill and ability is he likes to know how things work. Some of us don't care. They're just like, do I turn it on? If it doesn't work, I throw it away and I buy a new one. Right? Others are like, I'm going to take that apart. I was a taker aparter, not a very good putter togetherer. So I was curious, but then didn't know what I was looking at, and then I threw it away. So, but some of you are good at, let's take it apart, and we know all this stuff. We got some friends of ours have a little kid. He's like 5, 6 years old, and he's always taking things apart and rebuilding things. He had this idea the other day. He wanted to build a portable, one of those little battery packs you can take with you to recharge your phone or something, right? A little thing. He made one, with just parts around the house. He's like 6. And his parents are like, with an on-off switch. He added an on-off switch. His parents are like, I don't think it's going to work. Yeah, it'll work. And so his dad, who teaches at the University of Illinois, like, these are smart people, are like, okay, my 6-year-old says, so hasn't burned the house down yet. So some people are just good at that stuff. Ryan loves learning how things work. So he's just loving his nursing classes. For a while, he thought, I want to be an ER nurse. And I was like, you're so chill. You're who I want in the ER when I go there, because it's coming at some point, right? I want you, because he's just so calm, but not aloof. Like, he's very present. He just doesn't get upset or rattled. So like, that's what I want in the ER. That's a skill set, that kind of personality, right? Those of you who work in medicine are like, yeah, we want chill people there who don't get freaked out when, someone's like, yeah, my head fell off. Can you help me with this, right? He's really good at that. But then he realized, I don't like messes. Well, he's the guy that likes to do a house project because he likes to clean up afterwards. Total weirdo, right? Does great work. So, but then while he was in nursing classes and doing some rotations, he did a stint on the oncology wing. Like, oh, I like this because it's relational. He likes fixing things. He likes the relationship. So that's the ministry part that he was curious about, right? And he likes helping people. It all began to make sense. So sometimes and this is, he was in his, second half of his 20s when this all began to make sense. Sometimes it takes a while to figure out what all these things mean. But he was working on that, trying to explore, what am I good at? What comes natural to me? How do I do that to earn money, support my family, but also fill my place in this world? Sometimes it takes time, but we lean into it, not away from it. The consequences, like in the story, are we begin to fade and become obsolete. And Jesus says, we're going to keep moving forward, so I'm going to give that to someone else. R.C. Sproul says, the worst sin against stewardship is to waste your life. I'm, almost 50. And I wasn't that old when you begin to realize this is kind of cruising along, right? This whole life. And when you're in your 20s, it doesn't feel like that. But you hit 30 or so, and this is cruising along. And you begin looking back. And that's why things like 30 and 40 can be so tough on people, because they look back like, I just wasted this. I don't know how much more good years I have left. Am I going to waste that too? What's my life about, right? And sometimes that can take ridiculous proportions. I haven't bought a sports car yet. Not going to do that. Really want a motorcycle though, but I've wanted one for a long time, so that's not about being 50. We can waste our lives. And if you've been around any amount of time, you know people who are sitting there and they're wasting the time they're given. They are not stewarding what they're given. One of the things we're given is time. We don't know how much. You just don't know. There's so many things, so many variables that can cut that time shorter than expected. COVID did that for a lot of people. Accidents do that. Random diseases, random accidents. You name it, things can happen that cut our lives short. And so we need to take advantage of what we have, because it can be so good. Not perfect. We're all fallen. And yours, no matter what. I'm getting too excited. Just don't move. I'm trying not to move. Now it doesn't want me to talk. So is that? Who agrees with the sound system? Just kidding. Okay. I'm going to get that. I'm going to turn that off. Sorry about that. I'm going to do this now. So if you know how sound systems work, that is a gifting we could use. We have a place for that here at Bluffs Community Church. Many of us have known someone, and we've seen that fading. We've seen that diminishing. They have something they're good at. They have a place, and they're too scared, or they've been shamed or embarrassed or run away for whatever reason, and they're not thriving in what they're good at. I'm not talking about how much money they make or how much prestige they have. I'm just talking about them being their best selves, doing those things that come naturally for them. Moving on into 1 Peter. 1 Peter 4, verse 9. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling, as each has received a gift. Use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. Whoever speaks as one who speaks oracles of God. Whoever serves as one who serves by the strength that God supplies, in order that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. To him belong glory and dominion forever and ever. So we can often, in these situations or these settings, really emphasize the importance of, in whatever level of prestige, value to things that happen on stage. And they are important. And that isn't altogether unbiblical. At the same time, it's important to notice what Peter is doing here. He puts the greeters and the preacher in the same plane, in the same sentence. Right? We all have a role to play in the kingdom of God, and it's all important. What does it do? It brings glory to Jesus. I've talked about this before. At our parent church, Jim and Beth Gooden were here for our birthday service.
Beth, his wife, is a gifted greeter. There are many people in that church that are there because Beth was at the door when they walked in. And she's just good at it. She comes in. She's so present. She's so excited to see you. She asks a couple questions, gets to know what you're interested in, makes some connections, and now all of a sudden you have a friend, right? Make sure you know where the coffee is and all that stuff. And now you're comfortable because you've got 2 or 3 people who know that you're there. She's really good at that. That has played such an important role for so many people in that church. And those of us who plan and do this stuff, I believe wholeheartedly that I could be up here, and I know because I've talked to you, because when you're honest, you've told me you kind of tuned out the whole message, but you really enjoyed the donuts. That's fine. That's fine. This is as much about the community of faith, getting together, learning to live together, learning to live and love together, and share that love with the cross, as it is this. These things are put on in the same sentence. All are given, and these are just examples that Peter's giving, just examples. And you think of that as a church service like this, from the hospitality, from the greeting to this. It's like the bookends, right? Everything that happens, everyone who does something plays an important role. We joke about needing help with sound. We do need help with some of our tech for sure, but this doesn't happen, or happens very differently, without those folks sitting at the table. It doesn't. We could do it. There was a service about a year ago when Josh was sick, and so Letitia and I were at service. It was at the sanctuary, and so he was telling her how to set up the soundboard, and we made the mistake of I was supposed to play guitar, she was going to play and sing. We thought we can get it set up and do service without a sound person. You cannot. Or you should not. We did. Not well, but it happened. Lesson learned. People at the booth, really, really important. Really, really important. So we all play an important role. Peter is bookending all these things that happen in a service that put a church service on to be the church are important. And they all do what? They give glory to Jesus. So when you work in your gifting and you steward that well, you aren't pouring coffee, you aren't saying hello, you aren't setting up kid stuff or hauling stuff up to decorate the stage and equip that. You are giving glory to Jesus. And that's what this is about, loving each other and loving God. Stewardship is about worship. W.H. Auden said, you owe it to all of us to get on with what you're good at. If you're that foot, I need you to be that foot so this church can walk. If you're that eye, I need you to be that eye so this church can see. If you're that ear, I need you to be that ear. Or that hand, whatever it is, I need you to be that so we can be the best church we can be. Not in comparison to anyone else, but so we can just be more like Jesus and share Jesus better and live more fully in the giftings he had. Because his church, his message, his gospel is going to go on whether we participate or not. Because it's about him more than it's about us. He just wants us along for the ride and wants to do that fully and abundantly. That day in the beginning that we started with, creation, when God makes everything and puts us on the planet and says, go and enjoy and steward this. When God made us stewards of the earth and of our lives and our potential and our future, it was followed by the Sabbath, which I think is a really important part of the story. We were created and given work to do, but before we did any work, we were given rest. So God's first act is to say, here's what I want you to do, but let's rest and just be together. So stewardship and grace seem to be back to back. It's a grace. It isn't meant to be more work or more of a burden for us to do what we're given to do. It's how we worship him. It's how we're in relationship with him. It's an act of grace to give each one of us different, unique gifts. Our challenge then is just to appreciate each other's different gifts. The story begins with creation, relationship, love, a holy charge to go and do things in grace. And so stewardship isn't a burden. By managing our whatever well, we're actually making life better, richer, fuller, more abundant, I think easier. The command to steward is an invitation to rest in the full enjoyment of all that God has for us. It's not more work. It's not more striving. It's more grace. And it's very good, what he says in the beginning. Worship team, if you want to come up. The economy of the kingdom of God is upside down. In the kingdom, we decrease when we hoard, but we increase when we give away. When we keep things to ourselves, we're actually diminishing. We're becoming less of who we are. And the kingdom is going to go on with us or without us. If we choose to keep leaning away from Christ, keep leaning away from what we're good at, we diminish. We become less. But we become more as we give away. In the kingdom, there are no gifted or talented, because we're all gifted in some way. Every one of us is gifted in some way. Every single one of us. And in the kingdom, each gift has its purpose and place, which means each person has their purpose and place. Each gift has its purpose and place, which means each one of you are gifted, and each one of you has an important role to play in the kingdom here on earth. It's not about making money. It's not about prestige. It's about glorifying God and serving one another, being that full body, living more abundantly. Like I said, I know it can be scary to say, I think I'm good at this, or I think I might be good at this, or I'd like to try this, or I don't know what I'm good at. I hear that. Let's talk about it. Let's move toward it. Let's experiment. Let's see what we can discover together. And maybe it'll take some time, like my friend Ryan. Maybe it won't. But let's work on it together so we can all be more whole, be better image bearers, be more like God, and this church can move forward more fully and give him more glory. As we head into this last song, I encourage you just to offer that prayer up. Lord, what do you have for me? What have you given me? You've given me a talent. Maybe 2, maybe 5, maybe 10. You've given me something. What is that? How do I do that? How do I use that to glorify you? And just try to be receptive. Lord, show me. Speak to someone else. Speak to me directly. Show me somehow something I can do to glorify you. And I think he'll answer.